Millions of dollars that are going to funding our enemies in Afghanistan for the bullets that are shot at our children may be coming straight, directly paid out from the U.S. military, which means it's coming straight from you, the taxpayer, by way of the Department of Defense or the State Department. It's not that the military doesn't know that they're doing this, by the way. They do know that they're doing this, and they keep doing it. The magazine The Nation laid out brilliantly how this works. It costs money, as we would all imagine, to move supplies to our troops across Afghanistan. Everything from guns to toilet paper, building supplies, fuel, has to be flown into Afghanistan, usually to Bagram Air Force Base. So imagine all these planes landing like they would at any other airport, except for it's Bagram in Afghanistan. And now you have these sort of crates of materials, and it's your job to get those materials across huge expanses of desert on big trucks, much of it populated with Taliban insurgents trying to get those supplies out to various bases that we have our soldiers located at right now, as you and I talked this morning, in Afghanistan. So to do this, to get the supplies out, we have two choices. Arm the convoys, those trucking convoys, and risk a bloody battle every time the trucks leave Bagram and head for a base. Imagine, again, Mad Max, effectively, right? Armed guards around convoys moving around a desert nation at war with the Taliban as they move it. Or convince the Taliban that while we move our war supplies from Bagram to the bases, that it's in the Taliban's best interest not to attack American convoys. How do we do that? We pay them millions of dollars. Take, for instance, Ahmad and Rashid Popal. These are two cousins of the newly re-elected president of Afghanistan, Hamid Karzai. So think of your cousin. These are his cousins. They control a huge company called Watan Risk Management. Your cousin's got a risk management company. You happen to run Afghanistan. And their job is to protect U.S. convoys and essentially control a key stretch of road to Kandahar, which is known as Highway 1. Picture it as the big freeway out of Bagram. According to The Nation, Watan is allied with the primary warlord who controls that territory, right? So let's take a step back and show you how this really works. It begins with the U.S. government money, our money, your tax money. You go to work, you pay your taxes. That money flows into Afghanistan by way of the State Department and Defense Department and goes to trucking companies who are in charge of moving our U.S. troop supplies from the Air Force Base around the country. One such company, called NCL, and owned by the son of the Afghan defense chief, you can see how this works, operates on a $360 million U.S. government contract. That's your tax money being paid to those people. That company goes to our friends at Watan, your cousin. So I got the defense minister's son dealing with the president's cousin. Good times. We deliver the money and they deliver it to the Taliban so that as our soldiers are supplied with our supplies that we're paying for, don't get shot at by the Taliban on the way down the road. How much are we paying them? Well, according to The Nation, the payoff is around $500,000, $500,000 a month on this one deal. That's $6 million a year going straight in. Then these cousins of Karzai pay off the Taliban insurgents, and of course they use that money, the Taliban insurgents who are taking the bribes not to shoot at us as we deliver supplies, to go out and buy guns and RPGs and other explosives that they use to then attack our military men and women once the supplies get to the base. In fact, U.S. military officials in Kabul estimate that at least 10% of the billions spent U.S. taxpayer dollars on Pentagon logistics contracts in Afghanistan go directly into the pockets of our enemies to bribe them not to attack our supply chains so that they can then take the money to engage in a battle over rocks and heroin with us in Afghanistan. Joining us now, Jeremy Scahill, reporter for The Nation magazine, that's done a tremendous amount of work on Blackwater specifically, also very familiar with the phenomenon I was just describing. Back for a second hour of the morning meeting, Jeffrey Adicott, former Jaguar Judge Advocate General, now Director for the Center for Terrorism Law at St. Mary's University, and joining us from Miami, former U.S. Attorney Kendall Coffey. Our question, A, what's going on here, and B, what legal recourse, if any, does anybody have on the taxpayer side to say, what the heck are we doing with all of our money? But is this as outrageous as am I being inflammatory in my description? Am I missing something?
No, and my colleague Aram Rostam, who did that story, did a phenomenal job investigating this. Let's remember this, Dylan. There are less than 100 al-Qaeda operatives believed to be in Afghanistan right now, according to General Jim Jones, the National Security Advisor. So the line now on the table is, let's escalate the number of troops in Afghanistan.
To 100,000 troops.
Right, because the Taliban, not to mention an equal number of private contractors.
How many
we can talk about that later. Less than 100,
so it's 1,000 troops per al-Qaeda.
So, right. So now what they're saying is we need to escalate this because the Taliban is getting stronger. But what we find out is that it's actually the Taliban are being fueled and funded by U.S. taxpayer dollars to not shoot at trucks. Not just that, Dylan. We have intelligence contractors, private companies working intelligence that are actually hiring Taliban guys to translate transmissions and giving them back to the U.S. I talked to one person within the intelligence community who said they could be basically translating Who Wants to Be a Millionaire and we wouldn't know it. And they could say, well, this person is here, this person's there. Why are we paying the guys that are then being used as the justification to escalate the number of troops?
When you digest the fact, Jeff, that U.S. tax dollars are being funneled through the State Department and the Defense Department to pay bribes to Taliban operatives not to sit 4,000 yards away from a truck invisibly where they can blow somebody's head off. Literally, it's the worst. It's beyond anybody's real comprehension. What recourse, either inside of the military legal structure, and Kendall, I'm going to ask you what recourse outside of the military legal structure does anybody have to interfere with the policy of using U.S. taxpayer dollars to pay our enemy?
It's exactly correct. We're funding both sides of this war. And, of course, what the Department of State, Department of Defense is doing, they're saying we're not directly doing it. We're hiring the subcontractors, and the subcontractors are then paying their cousins, their brothers, their warlords to do this. The figure's not 10%. I would say it's close to 30, 40%. It's more money goes into the Taliban through this avenue than through the drug sales that they do. We used to talk about the drug sales were fueling the Taliban.
I just figured it was a bunch of heroin dealers. I didn't know.
The United States military, we need a definite strategy. This nation-building stuff is not going to work. Afghanistan is broken times 100. We're not going to build that country back up into a democracy. Candidate Obama had it right. Go into Western Pakistan, destroy these people where they have reconstituted. Instead of fiddling around without a strategy, nobody knows what they're doing. It's a deer in the headlight. We need to focus. We need to get to a decisive military victory, not this nation-building corruption game that we're playing.
Kendall, if you were to look at it again from a taxpayer perspective, from a legal perspective, where it is our children and our money that are at war in this country, and we know that we are funding at least 10%, maybe 30 or 40% of the money of our opposition, who is basically allowing us to stage ourselves in the country, and we pay them a bribe to allow us to stage ourselves in the country so that we then fund them to fight with us once we've staged the theater. Is there any legal recourse as a U.S. attorney, for an attorney general, for anybody to say, what are you doing with our taxpayer money funding the opposition?
Well, Dylan, it really is mind-boggling. If this occurred inside a U.S. city, we'd call it what it is. It's a protection racket. It's a crime of extortion, and there'd be all kinds of legal theories and charges and arrests that could be made. It's a little more complicated here, but one of the key things, which I think is fascinating, is can you take the position that these so-called security companies, which are inextricably bound to the Afghan government, I mean, they're relatives,
they're family members. It's my cousin and my brother's kid. Right? It's my cousin and my brother's kid. Sorry, go ahead.
Which you can take the position, no, but you're exactly right. If you take the position that these are quasi-government entities, that these are in some fashion a part of the government, then you can take a serious look at whether this is some form of payment to foreign officials, and that opens a lot of criminal charging statutes. It's not a perfect fit in terms of the existing U.S. laws and possible prosecutions, but it's not an impossible stretch either, especially under these outrageous facts.
Yeah. It also begs the question, what are we doing propping up the Karzai government? The Karzai family is on the insurgent side of things. The brother was on the CIA payroll and was a narco trafficker. We're funding warlords, thugs, war criminals. And
this is another show. The thing with this war is we got 10 shows on this one. I think we're done with this conversation for now. Jeff, thank you so much. You have something I can see real quick.
Well, you know, there are more civilian contractors in Afghanistan than there are military personnel in uniform.
That's right. And they're spending U.S. taxpayer money.
U.S. taxpayer
with Taliban.
Yes, exactly.
To fight us.
Essentially,
we have entered the crazy zone. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Let us get out of the crazy zone promptly. The war in Afghanistan entering its 9th year. No end in sight. Our troops are the ones getting the shortest possible end of the stick, with many of the same service members being deployed, 5 or 6 times with minuscule breaks in between. Adding to this, our economy, of course, a boon to military recruitment. recruitment because of the recession. I do want to point you to an article that I've written on the Huffington Post talking about one small thing we can all do to help our fighting men and women as opposed to pumping money into rescuing banks that we know are exporting that money out of our country. We can deliver the money to the most deserving in our country and in the process reprice a screwed up housing market by simply assigning a credit that is tradable to those troops. Go to HuffingtonPost.com, check it out. I'd love to get your comments on it. We're going to take a break here. We are back at the morning meeting right after this.